welcome to another edition of Expert Speak. Today, our guest is Dr. Passang Dorji. He's an MP from Bhutan, but today he's here in his individual capacity as a scholar. And in our conversation, we'll discuss topics on Bhutan's democracy, its economy, its foreign policy, and also his views on the region. Um, Welcome and a pleasure to have you, Dr. Dorji.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yhome and your team, Asian Confluence.
Okay, so let me start with uh, Bhutan's democracy itself. Bhutan's the introduction of democracy in Bhutan has been unique in the sense that it was introduced by the king himself. Um, so it's a kind of a top-down, which is not the case in many countries. If you look around, for instance, in many countries we have this democratic struggle, democratic uprising. Whereas in Bhutan, you have a very different case. Now, if you look also, if you look around today, the trends of democracy um, around the world, we see the quality of democracy declining all over. Now, in that context, how do you assess Bhutan, the state of democracy in Bhutan?
Thank you very much, Dr. Yhome. I will try to answer your question at two levels. One, a little bit of background to Bhutan's democracy, and second, my assessment of how our democracy is going. Yes, as you said in your question, Bhutan's democracy is unlike other democracies. That has been a result of struggle and also result of people's populist protest, whatever. Ours has been unique because the initiative to democratize the country actually came from the throne. And but there are people who think that democracy came all of a sudden. That is not true because though the democracy was started or initiated by the throne, there has been a lot of preparation. If you go back in time, the preparation has been from the 1980s through the policy of decentralization by His Majesty the Fourth King. So when we democratize, when we embrace that parliamentary democracy, ours, in terms of experience, though as democracy as a polity was new to it, but the operations were not new because we had the National Assembly, we had our parliament before we actually introduced that modern sort of similar to Westminster democratic traditions. And my assessment, as you pointed out, democracy in most of the countries has become a struggle. But here in Bhutan, in our unique setting, and democracy has been thriving. For example, we had three elections in the last 15 years of our democratic experience, and in 3 years, in 3 terms, we had different political parties coming to power. That actually is a testimony that democracy is thriving. But when I say this, it does not mean that Bhutan's democracy is perfect, picture perfect. We have our own challenges. For example, we still have people who are not able to understand democracy as a polity, and we still have people who think that democracy is a solution to everything. So, as we say that democracy is the worst form of government, except that all others have been tried. So, we have we still have a lot of work to do to really ensure that our democracy is mature and our democracy becomes that fits into our national aspiration. So that involves a lot of education, that involves a lot of discussion, public discourse. So though democracy has been declining the world over, my assessment of Bhutan's democracy is that we are on the right path. So time will tell us the maturity of democracy and the implications of democracy for national politics, national vision, and national aspiration. As far as I am concerned, as of today, I think it couldn't be better.
Sure. Right. Now, closely related to democracy, the function of democracy is seen in the context of economy. Now, if you look at Bhutan's economy, Bhutan is seen or considered as a development success story. Now, but in recent years, we have also seen some trends, or rather worrying trends in Bhutan's economy. One, of course, is the issue of out migration from Bhutan. I saw recently a report, a media report, about 12,000 professionals and educated section of the population from Bhutan have migrated to Australia. That's in just 1 year alone, and that represents about 1.5% of the population. Now, if you look at that from one angle, and look at on the other hand, if you look at Bhutan's own way of accommodating, or let's say opening up its economy for for foreigners to work in Bhutan. Um, my sense is if this trend continues, it will have a huge impact on Bhutan's economy in the coming years. What's your own assessment about this challenge, or your views on these challenges, and what are the remedial measures that are in place today?
Okay, you are right about Bhutanese exodus to especially to Australia, Canada, the US. This we are talking about political economy of the country, and I think you must be aware that Bhutan is a small economy that is driven by the public sector. And we are, as much as small we are, so much we are dependent on imports. And where in such economies, the private sector is quite weak. And when private sector is weak, the government sectors become the sole providers of jobs. So that is the challenge. That is why now, because that we have people who population that has access to all modern technologies, information. So it's all about looking at the opportunities, their economic, social aspirations in life. So we at home we have an economy that is not doing well. Out there, people see opportunities, and I think that is natural. If you look at the international migration trend, people tend to migrate to countries where they see opportunities, both social and economic opportunities. So the same thing is happening in Bhutan. Now, the question is, do we need to respond to it? Yes. Then how do you respond to this challenge? Initiated by His Majesty the King, the country is going through a major transformation. And most of the initiatives that if we look at, is targeted to developing our economy. Economic prosperity is central to the theme of transformation. So when we say this, then we are looking at creating opportunities. And we cannot say that our people should not move out because it is their individual right and individual choices. The best way that we can respond is to try to create economic opportunities in the country that are in other countries that attract our people. And the work is in progress. My assessment is that people will continue to leave, number one, for economic opportunities, number two, for social well being, and also, number three, for the benefit of their children. Because generally, the idea of migration uh, in the people of developing countries is that the future of their children. They always associate their uh, their idea of migration is always associated with the future of their children. So my educated guess is that lot of Bhutanese leaving the country for economic opportunities abroad is actually driven by their care and their sort of concern about the future of their children. I think people think that, firstly, if they migrate, they have good economic opportunities. Secondly, their children will also get good education and, as a result, good economic opportunities in the future. So, here, even at the policy level, at the individual level, and also the national level, this is one of the biggest concerns that we have in our recent memory. As I said before, the nation is amid major transformation, and most of the transformation activities are geared towards developing our economy. And we are hoping that these initiatives will bring about economic opportunities in the country, and that the people, the rate of people leaving the country will come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let me take our conversation to foreign policy. That's an area that you are very versed with. Like Nepal, Bhutan is sandwiched between two Asian giants, India and China, and for a very long time, it has played the role of a buffer between the two, between India and China. Now, see, in this age of internet and with physical barriers now becoming less of a a factor in engagements in interactions between nations, uh, the role of buffer is no more that effective in as far as a nation's role is concerned in separating rival powers or neighbors. In recent years, as India China's relations become more competitive, more hostile, we have seen Bhutan sort of seen itself as a net provider of security in the region, particularly in the context of China India. Uh, can you elaborate this the role of Bhutan in India China relations?
Uh, Thank you very much. That's a very important question. As you said in the beginning of our session, I am responding to your question in my individual capacity as a scholar, not in my official position. Uh, Small country like ours, be it Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and even beyond our region, smaller countries always have similar challenges. For example, in the Himalayas, Nepal is described as a yam between two rocks. And for Bhutan, I can also say that Bhutan is between a rock and a hard place. So this is actually defined by the geography. And the political geography actually dictates a country's foreign policy, especially the foreign policies of smaller countries. So In the international mm, relations theory and literature, smaller countries either balance against powerful countries that they think as a threat, or they bandwagon, or they hedge. For Bhutan, I think there is no question about its foreign policy to make it as something that serves its interest. At the national level, I think when you are in right between two big powerful countries, I think taking sides and trying to pitch one another is not really a good option. So, our foreign policy, as I look at from what we have in the public domain, Bhutan's foreign policy objective is to ensure its security, sovereignty, and economic prosperity, and also to ensure that our foreign policy endeavors contribute towards regional and global stability. So, now in the context of China and India, if you look at the architecture of the trilateral relationship, I think it couldn't be better. We have good relations with both the neighbors. Of course, because of the geographical reality and the geopolitical and the political geographies, realities, and the compulsions, we have more engagement with India because we are situated on the southern Himalayas. And as of now, our whole access to the global market or to the rest of the world is through India. So definitely the engagement with India is more compared to our engagement with China. That does not mean that we do not have good relations with China. We have cordial relationship with China, and it is in the interest of Bhutan to have good relations with both the countries. But we, I think, there is a sort of a misconstrued narrative that when Bhutan has more engagement with India, that means Bhutan does not have good relations with China. This is totally untrue. So now, given the geographical location of the country, it is definite and it is unavoidable that we have better, not really better, we have more we have more engagements with India. And now, if we look at how the things are going, now China has become a reality in our region, in South Asia. I think it is very natural for a small country like Bhutan to have more engagement with both. But Bhutan will never do, and Bhutan has never done in terms like pitching the two powers against each other. That is not in Bhutan's interest. But what I see is in international literature and especially commentators from the West and some part of India, I think there is a tone that the two powers being pitched against each other when it comes to relations, when it comes to their relations with the smaller neighboring countries. I think that should not be the case.
Mhm, mhm. No, in fact, on South Asian geopolitics, you have long been a close observer of South Asia. Now, you mentioned about the China factor emerging as a major defining, factor in South Asian politics. For a long time, it was the India-Pakistan rivalry that was the defining feature. Now, as you rightly say, China factor has emerged as one of the another or the key factor in the South Asian geopolitics. Um, how do you see this geopolitics, South Asian geopolitics emerging in the coming years, and how would you see? the its impact on Bhutan's foreign policy behavior. In fact, you have already touched upon some of these issues, but maybe if you can say something more on this.
Okay, if we look at the international diplomatic and geopolitical literature and the history of it, it is in the nature of a rising power to expand its interest. The rise in the military and economic power of a country brings, or it actually ensures that its expansion of its interest also goes beyond its borders and the region. So it has happened to China in the last few decades, especially after 1978, and especially and in a greater measure after the turn of this century.
Mhm.
So when China was not rising at the level or at the speed as it is rising, of course, South Asia was a geopolitical strategic backyard of India. That I think there is no question or no debate about it. But as China continued to rise, and when its footprints started expanding across the Himalayas and into this subcontinent, so it has become a reality for all the countries. Look at Bangladesh. The engagement of China has been growing deeper and deeper. Look at Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Pakistan. Of course, China's engagement with Pakistan has been there for a longest time compared to other South Asian countries. So, in the coming years, I look at that at the tiers of bilateral relationships and their importance.
Mhm.
Number one, in the global geopolitics, China US relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the global geopolitics. In Asia, China India relationship is most important. That has ramifications and implications for global geopolitics. So now, how the South Asian geopolitics shapes up in the coming years will be determined by the trajectory of China-India relationship.
Mhm.
And sad to say that China-India relationship has not been improving over this last few years, and we know the problems. Now, my the my not really a solution or the recommendation, but my wish is that if China and India's geopolitical interest in the region converge, definitely their bilateral relationship will improve. So at the moment, I think their economic interest is one of the factors that keep the relationship going. So
Mhm.
I think China and India needs to deepen their economic relationship, mutual economic relationship, and also people to people understanding.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if you look at their roles in this region, I think their relationship will shape the dynamics of inter or multilateral relationship of all the smaller countries in the neighborhood. My
Mhm.
fear is that if their relationship becomes more hostile, I think the implications of this hostile relationship between them will go far beyond the region, and it will go beyond the individual countries, especially the smaller countries in South Asia, and it will go even into the domain of global
Mhm.
politics.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when it comes to the smaller countries, I think especially countries like Bhutan, Nepal, I think pitching the two powers against each other will not serve our national interest. I think that we have to be very careful about.
Sure. Now, again, related to that is about regionalism or regional cooperation in South Asia. we all know that regionalism has been, kind of a failure with the SARC regional project not being able to even implement a regional project, a single regional project. Over the years, in recent years, we have also experiment or introduced new ideas such as well, the concept of sub-regions, whether it's BIMSTEC or BCIM. Um, what's your own take on the structural challenges of regional building in South Asia?
Um, I know that you specialize in sub-regionalism. That very interesting. That international relations theory that is the which work is in progress in South Asia. We have been talking about the connectivity, and in the traditional conventional academic narrative and the literature, I think connectivity is restricted or limited to physical connectivity. I have been arguing that there has to be mental, spiritual, social, political connectivity. I think the theory of connectivity must transcend uh, infrastructural and physical connectivity. Of course, a lot of focus has been on physical connectivity. There has been less focus on mental connectivity, the understanding of peoples in the different countries of the region. And I think South Asia, if we go by the level of integration of regions, I think South Asia is the least integrated region in the world. But maybe one of the regions that has the maximum potential to benefit the people if we can integrate ourselves as a region.
Mhm.
So we know that one of the first regional blogs or the regional institutions that we uh, have had in South Asia is SARC. SARC has not been that successful because of the reasons that everybody knows, because of India-Pakistan bilateral relationship. So I think when it comes to regional institutions, all the countries in the region must, I think, be able to go beyond the bilateral or trilateral uh, differences in the relations.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if we make bilateral relationship as a condition to succeed a regional institution, I think that
Mhm.
institution will never work.
Right.
I think
Right.
bilateral relations or trilateral relations should never condition the success of regional institutions. So
Mhm. Mhm.
that means I think there has to be more engagement at the people to people level, and also there has to be more understanding
Mhm.
uh, amongst the people in the region. I think at the moment, the state actors have defined the success or the failure
Mhm.
of regional institutions. Now I
Right.
think time has come where non-state actors must show the way for regional integration through regional institutions.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, interesting. No, in fact, when it comes to non-state actors, or or you are aware of the para diplomacy that the concept of para diplomacy that it exists. When it comes to such understanding of relations, what strikes me or surprises me is also about Bhutan and the northeast of India. Bhutan shares a long land boundary with three northeastern states, Assam, Arunachal, and Sikkim. But if you look at the sort of interactions, relations that we have, I mean, there's nothing much that we can talk about. Now, why, despite this proximity, and even you mentioned culture, people to people relations, and despite this existence of these cultural and people to people relations or interaction, why there has not been, why we have not been able to build a robust sort of a relationship between Bhutan and the northeast of India. I mean, I'm aware that Bhutan has opened a consulate in Guwahati. There is this the Bhutanese national carrier, Durg Air, operates a flight between Guwahati and Thimphu. But then beyond that, there's nothing much that one can really talk about. How do you think we can, build this sort of a relationship at the diplomacy level?
Very interesting. Of late, I have been thinking and I have been propagating some sort of idea called politics of proximity.
Interesting.
So I need to do some work on this politics of proximity. When we talk about regional integration and also cross-regional integration, it's all about politics of proximity.
Right.
As you pointed out, Bhutan and Northeast India have cultural connection, spiritual connection, and economic and trade
Sure.
connection as well.
That's
So
right.
we haven't been able to maximize
Mhm.
two mutual benefits.
Right.
That I think, number one, I would say that it has been because of the limited understanding of the potential
Mhm.
that lies in there. And the second one is, as you know, that it also involves the regional security stability.
Right. Right.
In the northeast region of India, as you know, that's where you are.
Mhm.
The region had some internal problems. I think that also contributed to not being able to foster or
Sure.
forge the trading or that connection between the people of Bhutan and people out there. So
Right.
now, when I look at this region, the region is becoming more stable by the day,
Mhm.
and that holds a lot of promises for interactions, for trade, and also the connectivity.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think now, and also the work kind of work that you are doing through your institution called Asian Confluence, I think this type of think tanks, institutions also have the responsibility to educate the people about the potential and the benefits of regional integration and also fostering the connection between the two peoples living just next to each other.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe my last question. In recent years, we have seen an emerging scholarship on Bhutan's foreign policy that kind of shifts away from the conventional India-China framing. Um, in fact, there is this new emerging narratives builds on the idea of Bhutan as a norm entrepreneur in especially in the context of global sustainability governance and also development discourse, particularly by placing happiness in the global agenda. Now, how how do you envision Bhutan's role in the global agenda, in shaping the global agenda in the coming years and decades?
Okay, Yomi, I will try to answer your question at two levels, one at the regional level and one at the international level.
Mhm,
At the
mhm.
regional level, as we discussed before, smaller countries now have assumed more importance in terms of their role amid rising powers. They
Right,
have become net security providers.
right,
For example, Nepal, Bhutan are right between China and India. So their foreign policies will also have implications for the national security calculations of the bigger countries around. So, in that way, Bhutan has a role to play, a responsible role to ensure that our regional security is stable for the interest of the neighbors as well as for its own interest. And that Bhutan will never deviate from that commitment to play a constructive role to ensure there is a regional security for the interest of all the countries and beyond, all the countries in the neighborhood and beyond.
Mhm, mhm.
And for smaller countries can never maximize and capitalize on hard power.
Mhm.
Their option that we have, the option that they have is soft power.
Right.
And the soft power is all about creating norms. And in international relations, we call norm entrepreneurship.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
in what area is Bhutan a norm entrepreneur? That's the question that you want me to
Mhm,
answer.
mhm,
When we look at our role in fostering norm entrepreneurship, it does not necessarily mean that we want to suddenly jump out of the China-India framing.
mhm, mhm.
And we cannot change our neighbors. We can change our friends, but we cannot change our neighbors. As long as in the life of Bhutan, China and India will always remain as our friends and good friends.
Right.
So, in our norm entrepreneurship pursuit, it is relevant to what's happening in the world. The world is being confronted by the onslaught of fast changing climate change that has implications for the lives and livelihoods of people all over the world. And
Mhm,
since the 1970s, Bhutan has been pioneering a
mhm.
development philosophy called gross national happiness.
Right. Right.
When we talk about gross national happiness, it does not mean that we are not interested in developing our economy. The
Mhm,
theory of gross national happiness proposes that there has to be a balance between our material pursuit and
mhm.
spiritual needs.
Right.
It is all about striking a fine chord of balance between materialism and spiritualism.
That's
And this idea of development philosophy has actually gone beyond Bhutan, and now this is also being discussed at the global political economic discourses.
right. Mhm,
So I think Bhutan stands out as an example to pursue this because we sincerely believe that there has to be a balance in our material pursuit and the well-being, spiritual well-being of the people.
mhm, mhm.
So when we look at this policy is not only for development philosophy, is not only for Bhutan, but if it is understood well, it stands to serve the purpose of the global agenda to ensure that our economic resources, biological resources, environmental resources are used sustainably.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think, as we know, that the future of humanity is actually anchored to the health of our global environment. So that
Mhm.
way, uh, Bhutan's we are not saying that we are using this gross national happiness concept as our sort of a tool of foreign policy,
Mhm.
but we also would like to let the world know that small countries like Bhutan, situated in a remote Himalayan sphere, has this
Mhm.
global ambition,
Right.
and we
Right.
would like to be one of the contributors to this global well-being.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Dorji, was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.